Mhm.
Hello, welcome. My name is Andre.
My name is Chandani.
We are giving it a go at our podcast series. We're going to begin with the word before the world. Sanskrit, the Indus Valley civilization, and Ramayana, which is a story from the Rig Veda. Um, we will be reading from the script we wrote and developed. We did research over the last
Couple weeks.
and so this is us telling the history of what we know about the history of Sanskrit. So imagine a word, not just any word, a root, a seed buried so deep in human history that it eventually grew into the languages of ancient India, Persia, Greece, Rome, and eventually into the very English you're listening to right now. Why are we even discussing this? After being exposed to the Hanuman Chalisa, I had so many questions for Chandani. We discussed the Hindu gods, the Vedic texts, and as we explored, we found that the language of Hindi, which is the de facto language of a majority of India, is only about 200 to 300 years old. India, being a culturally rich country with ancient temples, ancient languages, and ancient religions going back thousands of years, having a language that was only about 200 to 300 years old was seemingly out of place. We immediately thought it was due to the British and the effects of their colonial restructuring. Chandani enlightened me that Sanskrit was what the ancient Vedic texts were written in. Following this rabbit hole of linguistic origins, we then asked, where did Sanskrit come from? Well, it comes from the Proto-Indo-European spoken language that gave way to languages such as English, German, Norse, Latin, Greek, Roman, Old Persian, Iranian, and our topic for today, Sanskrit, which it turns out gave way to the languages of modern day India, Hindi, Urdu, Bengali, and Punjabi. So, though this ancient tongue branched into languages that would shape the cultures of people from England to India, we will be discussing the particular branch that led to Sanskrit and the languages of modern day India. So, let me give some historical context. The earliest documented speakers of Sanskrit were the Indo-Aryan people. Side note, arrived from the Eurasian steppe, modern day Ukraine, also known as the Yamnaya people, which were around 3,500 to 2,500 BC. They were a migrating group that split from the Proto-Indo-Iranian branch, which comes from the a migrating group that split into the Proto-Indo-Iranian branch, which comes from the Proto-Indo-European tribes, or Pi for short. We're going to be using this word a lot, so Pi was our go-to. I guess it's used scientifically by some of the scientists as well. So Pi was roughly spoken around 4,500 to 3,500 BCE, which is a parent tongue of most European and several Asian languages. These people further divided into the Mitanni elite, who back then ruled over the Hurrian speaking population. But Chandni will be covering that a little more.
So, a little about the Mitanni Empire. They were active during Babylonian Egyptian civilization and were constantly at war amongst each other in the region. It was a rich civilization who had their own language, and the Mitanni elites, integrated with the local Hurrian speaking population of that region, were also known as the Yamnaya people, as Andre mentioned, and also Sintashta Petrovka culture, who potentially were Ukrainian and Russian. These Yamnaya and related steppe tribes branched off from Pai as tribal and pastoralist groups that traveled across the continent and migrated in multiple directions. One group going southwest into the Near East, another going southeast into South Asia.
Oh, side note, it's very fascinating that these are the exact areas that we see the most conflict going on in today. Whether it's in Ukraine or Iran. These happen to be some of the places that the big world governments really seem to want to have the control over to claim for whatever reasons possibly
Yeah.
that they descend from the oldest people.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Moving
No,
on.
yeah.
The Mitanni elites, 1600 BCE, language known from the Kikuli horse training guide found in 1350 to 1400 BCE, is the closest to the Vedic Sanskrit of the Indo-Aryan region. The gods they worshipped were Mitra, Varuna, Indra, and Nasatya, which are very similar to the gods in the Rig Veda, which clearly shows the assimilation of the two different cultures, which we will deep dive into. Another interesting similarity is the Indo-Aryan numerals, which the Mitanni elite also seemed to use back way before the split of Proto-Indo-Iranian, 2200 to Can you scroll up?
Oh, no.
1800 BCE. So this part is extremely exciting, by the way. The Indo-Aryans who went southeast, arriving in South Asia, actually ended up meeting the descendants of the Indus Valley Civilization, or IVC for short. I'm going to be using IVC moving on because it makes everything much easier. They were likely Proto-Dravidian speakers, clearly proving that Vedic Sanskrit was adapted into the region. There were other languages and religions already existing in that region. So let's dive a little deep into Proto-Dravida's life before the arrival of Indo-Aryans. Why? Because though we cannot connect Sanskrit to Pi spoken languages, we found out that unfortunately that happened because the IVC languages seem to have no record, and through their relics with a definite language, we cannot decipher them. The Rosetta Stone allowed archaeologists to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphics from Greek, the Behistun, and in Western Iran, which allowed 3 languages to be compared all at once: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, Akkadian, which led to the start of deciphering of cuneiform. The only historical scripts referencing the IVC are from the Mesopotamian cuneiform, calling the IVC Meluha or Meluka, which was the Sumerian name for a prominent and prosperous trading partner of Mesopotamia during the Middle Bronze Age. So Mesopotamian cuneiform had all 3 advantages Indus lacked: a multilingual Rosetta text, known related languages to compare against, and long inscriptions. Though there are no surviving decipherable texts of the IVC, we know due to archaeology that they were far more advanced than the other contemporary civilizations in many aspects. It just looks like they were less meticulous in record keeping. And that's it. IVC existed between 3300 to 1300 BCE and was the earliest known urban city of South Asia, who came from a group of semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers around 7000 BCE, who settled in Mehrgarh, modern-day Balochistan. This is why the remaining Balochi people speak Brahui, a Proto-Dravidian language, which is primarily written using the Perso-Arabic script, whereas the 2 other Dravidian languages, Tamil, Telugu, developed in southern India, isolated from the Balochi people, though they most likely shared origins. Basically, the IVC and most of the other civilization at this time differed in their spoken language. Mesopotamia was the trade capital as it had the most closest proximity to all of the major civilizations of the Bronze Age world. This, along with their technological focus on cuneiform, made other civilizations who may have had different oral languages use the Mesopotamian written language, translating the sound of their oral language into the popular written language used by a majority of the civilizations of the time. So the Dravidas created from this Mesopotamian written language the written script Brahmi. The Brahmi script is one of the most historically significant writing systems in the world, emerging in ancient India before 3rd century BCE. This written language is known as the Brahmic family tree. Brahmi evolved into a massive, diverse family of writing systems used by hundreds of millions of people before it had no written language, just millennia of oral language that had been memorized and passed down. It is broadly split into 2 main branches. Northern branch led to scripts like Devanagari, used for Sanskrit, Hindi, and Marathi, Bengali, Gujarati, and Tibetan. Southern branch led to scripts like Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, as well as the Southeast Asian scripts like Thai, Khmer, and Lao. The largest civilization of the ancient world, bigger than Egypt and side note, IVC was known as the largest civilization of the world at the time, as it was bigger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined.
Mm-hmm.
This is quite insane.
I think the number was like 100,000. What is it called? Kilometers?
No,
or like 1 million
kilometers,
kilometers,
something like that.
Yeah, like 1 million kilometers square miles or square kilometers.
Yeah,
sorry,
like that.
I get the miles. You know what I mean? But yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty bad massive. At its peak.
Yeah, I think it's reached from like modern day Afghanistan
Mm-hmm.
to like
Pakistan, India,
yeah,
all of India, and a little bit east as well.
yeah.
Unfortunately, their scripts remain undeciphered to this date, so we do not know what their language truly was. Thanks to natural calamities like floods, drought, rain, whatever remained was lost. The best guess would be that they spoke a form of Proto Dravidian language. Also, to give a better understanding of the IVC geographically, as we mentioned, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. Sorry, we already said that. The IVC was the earliest and the largest urban city between this time period. Where the Chinese were weaving silks, Egypt was obsessed with building pyramids, and Mesopotamia writing contracts for trade, IVC were obsessed with city planning, sanitation, smart governance, and maritime trade. They invented the first flushable toilets in history with the best known irrigation system that is still used today.
Okay, so this kind of gets to the question, and it's the heart of the episode. When these two worlds met, what actually happened? There's actually a ton of narratives when it comes to different people's perspectives, often wanting to, kind of create a narrative that fits what you'd wish to believe, like wanting to track this history to you in saying that actually, no, we were the people who brought this kind of knowledge or this kind of information. We're going to find that there's a lot of controversy surrounding this, and we, even as we continued to study this to the last minute that we are here making it for you, we found a lot of things that throw shade on all kinds of narratives. So what we're going to do is try to do the best we can to kind of provide you a good look of it from a non-biased point of view. And so
Research as well.
yeah, do your own research with all things, but like this is what we've developed, and we'll even have what's called our links and everything else from some sources that we've been able to find this information from, and we try to, like I said, keep it as unbiased as possible. But anyway, so as the heart of the episode, when these two worlds met, the Harappan and the IVC civilization with this Indo-Aryan group, what happened? So when the Indo-Aryans were scattered with the fall of the Mitanni Empire, they moved east and they met with the scattered remnants of the once great advanced IVC civilization. The fact is they each happened to have skills and technology the other lacked, which allowed for a peaceful unification of two scattered nations with no official written language, which allows for the eventual creation of Sanskrit. The two main historical phases of Sanskrit are Vedic Sanskrit. This is the oldest form. The language of the Vedas, the Rig Veda, its earliest text, was composed orally around 1500 to 1200 BCE by theories, potentially even older, and preserved with extraordinary precision through memorization long before being written down. So, these, what are they called? Brahmins, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would memorize the texts and they would pass it down and speak it in these hymns and sing it, and people would pick that up over time and it became like a ritual for a lot of people within the culture. So from who knows, they carried these for thousands of years and passed it down. And the gods like Varuna and Indra and all those such. But then there's classical Sanskrit, which is the Sanskrit familiarized in what we kind of know today. A standardized, refined form that around the 4th century BCE, the grammarian Pāṇini wrote the Astadhyayi.
Asta
I'm going to slaughter words. Just heads up.
Astadhyayi.
Yeah. What is it?
Astadhyayi.
Astadhyayi. A remarkably systematic set of roughly 4,000 grammatical rules in Devanagari script that fixed the language's structure. This didn't create Sanskrit, but it codified it, and the word Samskrita itself means refined or perfected. So, like, one thing that we note with a lot of these languages is that they were all oral. At a time where only a few countries or a few civilizations had a widespread written word, the Brahmic texts or the Brahmic script really helped a lot of these oral languages finally put their words to paper or to text.
To add more to it,
Mm-hmm.
Devanagari script comes from the Brahmic script.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's one of the what are they called? The branches that would come. That and was Tamil? Was it? No, there was another one.
No.
Was it Tamil?
Yeah,
Tamil,
Tamil, Telugu, Nepali, Marathi. A lot of them come from the Brahmic script.
Which is like the north and the south, and like the different inflections from the Proto-Dravidian to the Indo-Aryan that rose from this group. So for over a century, the popular story was simple and brutal. Conquest. The Aryans invaded the cities, fell. One civilization was replaced by another, which was absolutely wrong. Archaeology tells a completely different story. A story about two peoples who looked at each other across the cultural divide and chose to trade, to build, and to blend. Side note, we also found out that we'll come up to this later and we'll bring it up, but there's potentially that over time there are certain people within the culture that would then be persecuted against potentially. So like though that
Marginalized
yeah,
specifically.
there was a blended group of people within the Indus River Valley civilization coming from a mixed um, racial mixed origins of different ethnicities. So like in the civilization you had people of different races, but that doesn't mean everyone was always treated equally, and we will be getting into that too. But the transition in assimilation was documentedly peaceful.
Yes.
So that's something that's to be said. So this podcast will be divided into 15 parts and 3 episodes. I know that sounds like a lot, where we will explore this cultural unification, the story of Sanskrit, and the story from the Rig Veda, Ramayana, and our hypothesis of its roots. So let us begin. Now that we have context, we will begin Sanskrit, the language of the elites, the language of the sacred, the language the language that never truly died.
So, part 1, the mother tongue. Before Sanskrit, there was something older. Every language alive today descends from something older. English comes from Germanic, which comes from Proto-Germanic, which traces back further still. Follow enough linguistic threads and you arrive at a single ancient source, a language scholars call Proto-Indo-European, or Pi for short. Pi was spoken somewhere between 4,500 to 3,500 BCE, that's over 6,000 years ago, by a community of people living on what we now call the Eurasian steppe. We don't have any written records of this language, nobody does, but linguists have reconstructed its basic structure by working backwards from the hundreds of languages it eventually gave rise to. Sanskrit, Latin, Greek, Persian, English. All of them share a common ancestor. From Pi, one major branch emerged that we called Proto-Indo-Iranian, the parent of both the Iranian and Indian language families. This branch had a few key sound shifts. That's what linguists call them satem shift, where certain ancient consonants turn into hissing, sibilant sounds, and the vowel system simplified dramatically. Multiple distinct Pi vowels collapsed into a single ah sound. But perhaps the most important legacy of Proto-Indo-Iranian is cultural. The people who spoke it called themselves Aryas, from the root Arya, meaning noble. You'll hear this root echo through history in the word Iran, which literally derives from Aryanam, meaning land of the Aryans, and in Sanskrit's own term Arya, a word the ancient Vedic people used to distinguish themselves from outsiders. In Sanskrit, Arya primarily translates to noble, honorable, or respectable. Historically, it was used as an honorific for a master, a wise person, or someone of high moral character. If we are correct, Pāṇini, who had Dravidian roots, could have written this word to mean asshole, conqueror, or any other negative connotation, but this was not the fact. Now, and this is critical, the word Arya has nothing to do with the racial ideology invented in 19th century Europe. The original term was a cultural and linguistic self-identifier, not a racial category. These people who used it were diverse, nomadic, and as we're going to discover today, deeply willing to integrate with whoever they encountered. We'll come back to that.
Very fascinating. I mean, I did the whole Iran, Aryan kind of like route. You know, it's interesting to see because it's kind of like them setting themselves in as a noble kind of group.
Yeah.
So part 2, the Great Split, when one people became two. Now we enter the Bronze Age, and things get interesting. By around 2000 BCE, the Proto-Indo-Iranians were moving. These were pastoralist peoples, cattle herders, horse domesticators, and crucially, chariot builders. Their ancestors, cultures like the Yamnaya and the Sintashta, had spent millennia on the steppes of what is now Ukraine and southern Russia, developing a toolkit for mobility and warfare that was almost without rival in the ancient world. The Sintashta culture, flourishing around 2108 to 1800 BCE in the southern Urals, is credited with one of humanity's most consequential inventions, the spoke-wheeled chariot. Not the heavy, solid-wheeled wagons of before, but light, fast, war-ready vehicles pulled by trained horses, and the horse itself had only been fully domesticated around 2100 BCE, north of the Caspian and Black Seas. Early horses were too small to ride, too weak to pull solid-wheeled wagons, and the invention of the spoked wheel and the chariot is what unlocked their full potential. This was the Bronze Age equivalent of air superiority. Whoever had chariots had a mobility advantage that foot soldiers simply couldn't match. Armed with this technology, Proto-Indo-Iranian groups began migrating south and east into Central Asia, into a region archaeologists call the Bactria Margiana Archaeological Complex, or BMAC, located in what is now Turkmenistan and Afghanistan. This migration is often celebrated and showcased during national holidays, like Nowruz, celebrating the integration roughly around 2000 to 1500 BCE. This is when the Great Split happened. So, side note, this is also potentially why even today we find Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and all the other stands have a culturally deeply seated with reverence for horse riding. For example, Kazakhstan's horse competitions are deeply rooted in nomadic heritage, blending high-speed equestrian skills with ancient traditions and extreme sports. The most notable and spectacular events include Kakpar, Baija, and Kizku. Kakpar is the ultimate team sport. Often described as one of the world's most intense traditional sports, Kakpar is similar to polo, but features teams of riders battling over a weighted dummy goat carcass instead of a ball. Players use immense strength, horseback wrestling, which I've never heard, oh my god, and agility to snatch the carcass and drag it in across the opponent goal line. I'm gonna go check that out after this, honestly.
Me too.
We'd love to watch that. So what was the Great Split? One group, the Iranian branch, settled primarily in the Iranian plateau in Central Asia. Their language would eventually become Avestan. Iranian. The Iranian branch. So their language would become Avestan, which there's ancient manuscripts. It was the sacred tongue of the Zoroastrianism group, or Zoroasters, and Old Persian, the language of the Achaemenid Empire. The other group, the Indo-Aryan branch, turned south and east into the Indian subcontinent, and they were heading towards something that would have astonished them.
Part 3. The world they were walking into. Maluha, the civilization at the end of the world. Here's what the history books rarely tell you. When the Indo-Aryans began their migration toward the Indian subcontinent, they were not walking into empty grasslands. They were approaching one of the most sophisticated civilizations on Earth. The Indus Valley Civilization, or IVC, also called the Harappan civilization. By the way, some side notes. Indus Valley Civilization only got its name because it was found near the Indus River. And the Harappan civilization was called the Harappan civilization. They're interchangeably used. That was because they actually found the site in 1921, and they coined it, calling the Harappan civilization. But they're both the same.
Yeah, because it was like the Harappan city, right?
It is the Harappan city. It's one of the IVC cities. So they were flourishing since at least 3,300 BCE. By its peak between roughly 2,600 and 1900 BCE, it was extraordinary by any measure. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro each housed a population of up to 40,000 people. The streets were laid out in precise grids. They had standardized bricks with uniform ratios maintained across hundreds of miles. They had indoor plumbing and covered sewage system that wouldn't be matched in Europe for another 3,000 years. Like, wrap your head around that shit.
Yeah, right. Like, what other societies other than like certain Romans, aqueducts and stuff? I mean, they did find some stuff in like Inca and like the South Americas, which shows that like most of these civilizations were more advanced than people like in the Dark Ages and like you know 100%. Where like they were glorifying technology and all these other things.
And they were like figuring out sewage system and making sure like you know.
they had trash bins. Right?
Yeah, they had trash bins.
So like
that was like the first recorded trash bin
yeah,
made out of bricks.
To have it, and they said it was in every single person's home.
Yeah,
like they found it wasn't like a thing of like, oh, like only the wealthy had toilets and like plumbing. It was literally everyone's home had this option, and they had public restrooms too.
Mm-hmm.
So like, man,
that's like one of the best things that I like about the Harappan civilization. Now we're gonna not that we're doing a deep dive, but they treated everybody. They did treat every citizen as equal. Like
to an extent, we don't know the hard facts, but
just knowing they had access to water
and a toilet,
indoor plumbing
your
in their
own home.
homes.
Yeah, it's not gonna use a communal pot if you didn't want to or you weren't in a rush.
Exactly. So that's like awesome.
That's pretty high standard of living. You know what I mean?
It is pretty high standard.
I bet the rent was pretty cheap too. You know, anyway.
So technically, we're probably using systems inspired by the IBC today. Which is funny, it reminds me of the Great Stink of England in the 1850s, where the river Thames was used as an open sewer for untreated human waste and had this sickening, unbearable stench. I read like a lot of articles and watched like multiple videos about that. And it's funny to think like if only British could appreciate the advancement and intelligence of an ancient civilization, they could have actually avoided the plague, lack of dental hygiene, and flavorless food.
I wrote that one.
Just saying.
Yeah.
He did. Okay, moving on. They were traders, by the way, world-class maritime traders. In fact, because the IBC was heavily engaged in overseas trade, managing major port cities like Lothal in Gujarat, Mesopotamians often referred to Meluha as the county of seafarers. So they were seafarers. They're nice as boats.
Yeah, I mean that's how they got all the what's called resources that they were like really connected into the what are they called, what is that, lapis lazuli?
Yeah, which I'm gonna get into in a minute.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. No.
The Mesopotamians called the Indus Valley region Meluha, and they traded with them constantly. Harappan seals, distinctive carved stone stamps used to authenticate trade goods. So they had IDs and stuff. Unfortunately, we can't decipher them, like what they meant.
Yeah, they were structured in 5-word codes. Yeah. So like it would be identifying of like I think the product you carried,
the guild you were part of, and what kind of merchant you were, all in that tiny ass ID.
And standing, but like that like the problem is, and like this is what we discussed in like its indecipherability, is that since other groups had massive texts that often then would like reference things or have like them right next to each other of 2 different languages, like a Rosetta Stone, there was nothing that they could find of this, whether that means somebody destroyed all of this information or they like focused so much on these other aspects of their living quality that they never really like manifested that or created that. We got into a whole debate too about the Mughal Empire and how they came into that area, and we don't know whether them or the British, like whoever potentially could have destroyed all of this information, or like some ancient group of people could have came and ran this over, or maybe there's more buried there that we still have yet to discover that might reveal more over time.
Yeah.
But at this point, like the texts, we don't have them. So
you do know this though. We only discovered the Harappan civilization in the 19th century. So we didn't even know a civilization like this existed because it was buried.
And like it's I mean, like thousands of years go by, like it makes you consider like what you could forget.
Yeah.
I mean, this was like, what is it, like 5,000 years ago or 4,000, 5,000 years ago?
4,000 years ago, yep.
Huge time frame of like point of reference, because like we live like, if we're lucky, like 100 years, like, yeah, so.
All right, moving on.
The Mesopotamians, right? Called the Indus Valley.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, they traded constantly, and distinctive card stones, stamps used to authentic trade goods, which we talked about, have been found at archaeological sites across Mesopotamia, including the great city of Ur. Harappan merchants exported cotton textiles. They were also the first civilization to cultivate cotton. Carnelian beads from Gujarat, ivory, timber floated down from the Himalayas, and above all, lapis lazuli, the brilliant blue semi-precious stone mined in Afghanistan that was the most prized luxury material in the ancient world, adorning the tombs of pharaohs and the crowns of Mesopotamian kings. The Harappans even established a trade outpost in Afghanistan, a site called Shortugai, specifically to control the lapis lazuli supply chain. Harappan artisans processed the raw stone there, turning it into beads and ornaments before shipping it onward to Iran, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. This wasn't just trade, this was a global supply chain managed with sophistication and precision.
Side note, I know we were discussing this because there's the bead business you were considering making for the art that you really like appreciate and respect. What was that called again? The
Potya.
Potia.
Comes from
And
Nepal.
so we found also that they use certain drills
Yes.
to bore out the beads, but also we're utilizing these things for dental use.
Yes.
So like the first dentists,
Yep.
they potentially like they had like fillings and things where people's teeth had drilled holes in them, potentially moving cavities.
They
like,
actually did that. When you were talking about people who moved to Mehergar, they were doing this in 6,500 BCE. They were
so that's
already
like 7,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay, no, like maybe 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like 8,000 years ago they had dental.
Yes.
And I probably didn't require insurance. It probably was just like you trade a goat or like some like fucking cow or something. You know what I mean? Like, anyway. Yeah. Oh.
All right, moving on. Their trade goods also flowed the other way, by the way. They imported wool and silver from Central Asia, tin from Afghanistan for their bronze smithing, and gold from southern India. The Harappan civilization was, in the words of one scholar, the eastern end of the Bronze Age trading network, a commercial ecosystem that stretched from India to Egypt and connected the ancient world. And the Harappan themselves, the archaeological record reveals something fascinating. Very few weapons of war. No depictions of conquest, no glorified battle scenes. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, where kings were constantly celebrating military victories and carvings and inscriptions, the Harappans left no such record. Their archaeology speaks not of conquest, but of commerce, of craft, of urban organization. These were, by the evidence available, a trade oriented, commercially sophisticated people, remarkable among their contemporaries for what they apparently chose not to do with power. This is the civilization the Indo Aryans were moving toward. A side note, by the way. And in our research, we did find out, like, as we talked about, like, no weapons of war. I also feel like they were constantly plagued by, like, floods and,
Oh yeah.
situations like that. So they were really focused on making a society where people were able to thrive and just overcome all these, issues that they were constantly facing. So it
Yeah.
kind of shows like they had their priorities straight,
Totally.
It
reminds me of like places like Florida or like other places that have like year-round like environmental concerns. It's like, or Japan, because
Japan
Japan has constantly earthquakes or like like tsunamis
Yep.
or like just bad stuff that just destroys like homes, and like the whole community comes together to be of use to try to repair and make sure that everything's back together. Like there's a communal effort because they realize that it could happen to anyone.
Yeah.
And so like they even worshiped like certain gods too, which were storm gods. And so it's like these monsoons would dictate the ability for them to have a successful crop yield. And so it's like when you rely on each other so often, so like regularly, it builds this community, which I think is fundamental to a society like this that is pushing like the node and like really like advancing in a far faster pace when it comes to the technologies that benefit people versus like war beneficial things that like help you conquer and take. So that was what made them unique, because they obviously were able to provide a lot, like the clothes. They would trade with all these other countries.
They were very fashionable too.
Oh, the beads.
Yeah, they were wearing. They were using charkas, or the weaving.
The wheels.
The wheels.
Yeah,
that they were using to make clothes, and it was fascinating to learn.
They also
about
had
that.
it seemed like they enjoyed playing games. They had that chess game.
I think they are the first inventors of chess. It was called Shatranga. It's a predecessor for chess, and they were very much like, they played strategic games. They made toys for children.
They made alcohol.
Oh, yes.
And they also
probably one of the first civilizations to be distilling alcohol.
Because it was the grain. I think it was barley and wheat. They were like one of the main providers and creators of that. They were also one of the first to have pottery utilized for these purposes, ceramics, and then another thing is they had a 6-sided dice, which is very familiar across all game players, D&D,
I
Yahtzee,
know.
whatever it may be.
They're
And
probably the first inventors of the dice.
yeah, there was like a stone die or
It was
clay
so
die with the
sick.
6 holes, like looks identical, other
It
than
was-
not being black and white.
It was so sick.
Um,
I would love to have a stone dice.
yeah,
Like
from that time.
Yeah.
But then you like roll it one day and it just shatters.
And it was probably
Fuck,
limestone.
dude, like-
No, it was probably made of limestone. Limestone was pretty durable.
tough.
Yeah.
Okay, not porous or any of that stuff.
Oh, another thing, just
Mhm.
since we were discussing, it kind of shows us, doesn't it? Like humanity thrives in community
Yeah,
when people start working together.
totally. Well,
Right?
it's like that's when like true invention can succeed.
Yeah.
Because like I think when you're working towards a common good, you get support from others too, and then you have people willing to teach other people, and
Yeah.
not like a hoard the information.
Yeah.
And like like when you're working towards a common good, like all hands on deck, every opinion is taken into account and appreciated.
Yeah.
And it really shows also people's character. Like I'm sure in the society, if you have like a super selfish person, the society will outcast that person, probably
Yeah.
like demand justice against them because like they stand in the way of them surviving. Anyway, part 4, the myth of the invasion, how a wrong theory lasted a century.
This one's good.
So, in 1944, a British archaeologist named Mortimer Wheeler became Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India. Wheeler was brilliant, prolific, and absolutely certain about what had happened to the Indus Valley civilization. I'm sure he said this stuff about himself. His theory was simple. The Aryans invaded, conquered, and destroyed it. He pointed to unburied skeletons found in the upper layers of Mohenjo-Daro, evidence, he argued, of massacre. He pointed to Vedic hymns that spoke of Indra, the war god, as a destroyer of cities. He constructed a narrative of nomadic warrior tribes on horseback armed with iron weapons and spoke-wheeled chariots who were sweeping down from the north and overwhelming the peaceful urban Harappans who never knew what hit them. This theory spread. It entered in textbooks. It became for decades the standard account, but it was wrong. Side note, many European countries that colonized had a view of being militarily and technologically superior to the people that inhabited foreign lands, like seen with the Germanic Aryans and the Nazi Germany's, of Nazi Germany, the Germanic Aryans of Nazi Germany. So this story fit their narrative in justification of dominance and subjugation, which was the narrative of most colonial empires when they subjugated cultures across the world. They wanted to be the most dominant and the guys who were like, we conquered everyone because like we were always just better.
And they wanted to justify like people are to be conquered.
Exactly. Like
Pretty
this is
much,
the way
like,
it's been and this is the way it should be.
Yep.
And that we, since we're technologically have some like stuff they don't, we got better weapons, we got these things, like they deserve to be under our foot. We deserve to be able to take whatever we want from them.
We are superior.
Because we're better, So here's how we know that narrative was false. First, the skeletons, Wheeler pointed out, at Mohenjo-Daro were re-examined by other scholars, who concluded that they were not massacred victims, but rather the remains of hastily burials. People who died at different times and were buried quickly, not slaughtered in a single event. Second, there is no evidence of burned buildings, toppled walls, or mass destruction, consistent with a military conquest at any major Harappan site. Before I get to the third, I just wanted to state also, they found a lot of struggle going on in the society. Like people were hungry, like they were running out of food. Their droughts were causing a lot of strife. So tribes and other people from outside would rob, take, and like just to survive. So when you start acting in the survival mind state, the society starts collapsing because all that community, all that efforts they worked to, like they had nothing to work towards anymore because they weren't getting the things they needed from it. So then it turned a little like bloodthirsty and hostile within the society itself.
Yeah, which was very sad.
Yeah, so, and third, and this is perhaps the most critical point, the timing doesn't work. The great urban centers of Indus Valley civilization began their decline around 1900 BCE. The Indo-Aryans did not arrive in significant numbers until about 1500 BCE. So at the earliest, that's a gap of 400 years, and so you cannot invade a country civilization that has already been declining for 4 centuries. At that point, they're already scattered. They were already divided into different groups and tribes. At that point, they were all on their own, trying to figure out society away from civilization. So what actually caused the collapse of the urban Harappan phase? The evidence points not to conquest, but to climate. Around 1900 BCE, the Saraswati River, a major river running through the heart of the Harappans' territory, began to dry up. Another side note. The
Saraswati.
Saraswati belongs to the Indo-Aryan language family Sanskrit, and is the name of a major deified river in the Rig Veda and a prominent Hindu goddess. However, in historical and archaeological contexts, this term is frequently debated in relation to the Indus Valley or Saraswati civilization, which predates Indo-Aryan texts, meaning this probably was not the original name of the river, because this comes from the Vedic texts, which was brought by the Indo-Aryans.
And it's funny, we were earlier when we were like reading through our notes and everything, and he mentioned Saraswati River, and I started wondering, Saraswati is one of
I
I'm Hindu.
had no idea.
I was born.
No
I'm
idea.
born and raised. I'm born and raised Hindu.
Like,
So I was like, Saraswati is one of our goddess names, and since after knowing the connection of Indo-Aryan gods and Hindu gods and how they became one once they integrated with each other, I was wondering how would the Indo-Aryan Saraswati name be coined for the Harappan civilization, and then that's when we found out, like, oh, it's probably not the original name. So that's pretty interesting.
It makes you wonder, and you should always question history, because it's
Yeah.
like a lot of things are hard to discern. And anyway, so basically after that, when the water began to dry up, a prolonged drought appears to have shifted rainfall patterns across the region. Cities that had depended on reliable river systems for irrigation and transport found those systems failing. Urban populations dispersed into smaller rural settlements scattered across a wider territory. It wasn't a dramatic collapse, it was a long, grinding demographic shift. The cities shrank, the trade networks contracted, and by the time the Indo-Aryans arrived, what they were entering was not the gleaming, thriving Malua of 2500 BCE, but a landscape of smaller post-urban communities, descendants of the Harappans, still carrying their cultural traditions, but no longer organized into the great metropolises of the past. One last side note is what we also read and found out was that, similar to Europe, once the water was drying up, all of these irrigation systems and their plumbing, which they had the first flushable toilet, right? All of these things stopped working because it all depended on pressure from vacuum systems that was dependent on the water flow from the rivers.
Yeah.
So once those were gone and they didn't have the right water, then all of these things ceased to work. So they too started dumping their feces and all of their shit into places, and it just started getting real gross and unhealthy, probably disease.
Yep. And so did their trade system shrunk because the river dried up. So
yeah, they were unable to like sail their boats to get to the cities of to trade, and like the land routes probably were not easy because they lacked the right wheels. Which is another reason that the Indo-Aryans probably was a huge boost to the potential of them reestablishing a successful empire.
Yep. Part 5. The meeting. Trade, not conquest. The real story of how two civilizations became one. And here is where the story gets genuinely remarkable. Modern archaeology, genetics, and a careful rereading of the Vedic texts themselves are converging on a picture that looks nothing like the invasion story. What they describe instead is something far more interesting: a prolonged, largely peaceful cultural encounter between incoming Indo-Aryan groups and the remaining Harappan population. An encounter driven by mutual benefit, admiration for what the other possessed, and a gradual generative blending of traditions. Side note: this proves that different civilizations can get along when they have mutual respect and appreciation of one another's cultures and technological achievements without the need of subjugation, domination, and theft. Another side note on that: we did find out
they were a little racist.
Yes,
I mean that's
the best way to put it, because of the caste system that was introduced by the Indo-Aryans.
What was it called? So with the V.
Varna. That's
which
what
literally
they
means
it. Color.
Color. But then also they like to we don't know if they try to hide it under like saying like, oh, these are your positions in society.
Yeah, that's what they called it. They said like they were classifying people based on their occupation.
Mm-hmm.
But they introduced a fourth. There was only three caste system actually,
Yeah.
but which they followed and were accustomed to, I believe, during the Mitanni Empire. But when they came to the Harappan civilization, remaining of the Harappan civilization, they introduced a fourth caste system called Shudras, which were basically servants and laborers. And from what we know in history, it was basically people of, darker skin
So,
tone.
and another thing to be said too is that they merged over 1,000 years. So, like, they came into the Indus River Civilization or the IVC, and they already had it. The IVC already had cultural diversity. So there was
Mm-hmm.
already people of different colors and different ethnicities blended, and the same thing occurred here. There was a lot of genetic mixing. People were
Mm-hmm.
getting married. They came in, and for a long time, it seems like there was a lot of what is it called? Like friendship in the sense of like them trading ideas, maximizing stuff, but there still seemed to grow this groupings of people and hierarchical stuff. Potentially there's also a hierarchical um like not a caste system but like a hierarchy in the Harappan society as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if its hierarchy is just an effect of civilization, those that have and those have nots, or those born into wealth and those born without. But go ahead, take it.
The the Harappan civilization hierarchy was different than what the Indo-Aryans actually
Oh no, no,
introduced.
they did. Like the
Yeah,
structure was totally different.
yeah, they were mostly based on like
Mm,
wealth, who was rich and who was not.
yeah.
It wasn't about
And
occupation.
in this one, this is what set up the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
For I'm gonna let you go because I think you talk about that. So
Yeah, and
you know,
even though, like, they did assimilate and people benefited from each other, there was a group that was marginalized and pushed further down to the southern region of India,
yeah. I mean, a
which we will
lot.
talk about
Yeah.
later as well in the podcast.
Well, it seems like also there was like a lot of people who already were looking for new water. So there was the
Yeah,
people.
that
The way
too.
they discussed it was, you have the people who moved north. So like the
Hmm.
people who moved north and west, they ended up running into the Indo-Aryans who were coming down from the Eurasian steppes.
I think Punjab region was
And
like the first time, or
yeah,
Balochistan somewhere,
so like
that they met them.
in Afghanistan, you have like Kyrgyzstan, I think, and like some of those places, and like they're coming down south, and those who went north looking for new water and new
Right.
sources of like land that was like farmable, they ran into each other, but the others went south, which probably ended up making a lot of southern Indians, maybe Sri Lankans. We don't know. A lot of people don't.
I think they were also kind of pushed, like,
Oh, I
to
mean,
move there.
well, it sounds like to me, it's like, and this is like an awful thing to say, but like if you have free labor, you
Yeah.
like usually don't be like go. You're like
Yeah.
like, oh, you'll work and do all the things and like
Yeah.
landscape. Like they still were able to survive, obviously.
Hmm.
I don't know the quality of like the
Yeah, the
lives.
quality of life is questionable.
Yeah, and I mean, but
Big
like
time.
considering Egypt and considering like I mean, like I don't want to be like saying the lesser of evils, but I mean, like some of these other places, like we have documented history of like how awful it was to
Yep.
be in their slave class,
Yeah.
and then maybe if it wasn't named that, we don't know. But that being said, like this story has positives, but we don't believe it was egalitarian at all. So
Hmm.
that was just something we thought we'd cover because
Yeah.
it's significant and it shows like we're not saying that they were like perfect.
Yep.
If anything, that's not true. So
Moving on. The Indo-Aryans brought the horse and the chariot, revolutionary military and transport technology. But in a post-urban landscape of smaller communities struggling after the decline of the great Harappan city, the horse also meant something else: prestige, speed, the capacity to herd cattle over vast distances, a new relationship with the land, and mobility. The Indo-Aryans also brought their three-tiered social structure, which is actually technically four that we mentioned earlier.
but see, it started as
It
three.
started as three.
So
That's
it's
what they had.
yeah,
That's what that's the social
it
structure
was
they
three
used
at
to have.
first
Yes.
until they're like, you know what?
Oh, there's another class that we
that guy
probably.
there is looking pretty dark.
Yes, that's
Horrible.
literally what it
It's
was.
like,
That's literally what it
oh.
was. It's funny. I was talking to my dad, and just like his opinion about what he thought about Sanskrit and where it originated from. And my father talked about this. He said, like, basically the Dravidas were treated as like monsters. The story goes on.
And this gets into the
It's-
Ramanaya,
Ramayana.
Ramayana, and it's like the people in the south were deemed demons,
Yes.
and the
And
people
also Sri Lanka, right?
yeah, in Sri Lanka, and the people in the north, who were the Indo-Aryans, were often like depicted as blue, but they like were lighter skinned, and then they like were considered like closer to
God.
Vishnu, and like you find this like delineation between the two gods, and this goes into like proto Shiva, all these other things that like would shape this depiction. We'll get into it more, but you know, it's like
Raman like abducting Sita, which was Ram's wife.
And he stole his wife. But the thing that's fascinating is in Sri Lanka, they literally will say like Ravan was a great man. He advanced like music, Ayurveda, and other like aspects that were really growing. That were, but they even admit that he was like losing it as a king. So like the story holds this like question of like reality or if it's false. Anyway.
Yeah, we just
back
thought
to your saying.
we just thought that we should add that a little bit.
And just flavor text.
Yeah. All right. So the Indo-Aryans brought the three-tiered social structure: priests, warriors, and commoners, and a complex ritual tradition tied to fire sacrifice and the hymns that would become the Rig Veda.
And what are those classes called?
Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. And the fourth one, Shudras.
Which didn't come until
Brahmins
later.
were the priests. Kshatriyas were the warrior clan, which actually that's supposed to be my caste. I'm from the warrior clan. And the third one is Vaishyas, the commoners, and fourth, Shudras, the laborers and servants.
And the commoners were like artisans.
Yeah. Oh, they were
landowners.
Yeah. They were like craftsmen. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how craftsmen were like the third tier. You know, warrior clan was the top one because those were the main ones.
When I look at
because I'm like craftsmen, like they're the ones who help the economy grow, right?
What I look at it like is like when you look at like our society, we have like the super elites, and then you have like the police and military, who kind of like keep this shit in order.
That is exactly.
And then you have like the artists that like keep everyone entertained and keep them busy. And keep them like, you know, like, oh, we provide everything else for society, but like we're still like third-class citizens to like these guys who could take everything from us, and these people who like administer and create the law and the way of the land.
It's interesting you say that because the warrior clan was to protect
the Brahmins,
the kings as well.
And it's crazy how like whenever you see the priest class in every society, like they're the fucking pedophiles and molesters. You know what I mean? Anyway,
getting back to the subject. Where am I?
And a complex.
Yeah. Oh, I said that. So they brought a new way of organizing society, one that gave defined roles to specialists: the Brahmin who knew the sacred words, the warrior who wielded the horse and chariots, the cultivator who worked the land. Which really, side note, which realistically wasn't the best thing. That's what we thought, because that system brought the caste system in the country. And you know, we did intend to explore the caste system in more depth in a future series. If you guys want us to do that, let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
These practices at the same time seem to have some benefits at the time of their inception. I would say I believe with that and not at the same time.
Yeah, well, it sounds like at first there was just 3 classes.
Yeah.
But, you know, with all that comes, like, a potential 4th class, which then would develop over time. We don't know. We haven't done the full research on the caste system's whole development. But if we're looking at the Mitanni Empire and how they ruled over the Hurrians, then it would seem that this system continuously leads to certain people within a society becoming subjugated and abused. Which is like happens, I think, in all societies nowadays. Which seems like it's happened back then too. So abuse, you know, it's everywhere.
Seriously.
Just abuse yourself. You know what I mean? Like.
All right. So. Consider what the remaining Harappan communities offered in return. Wait, millennia? Okay, I messed up that. Let me start from the top. Millennia of agricultural knowledge was passed on from Harappan civilization to the Indo-Aryan, so that's why they like helped each other out. Deep familiarity with the river systems, the seasonal rhythms, the landscape of the subcontinent. That's what the Indo-Aryans were like really fascinated by
Oh
because
yeah.
they were pastoralists.
And it seems like they were able to take that information and start applying it to like Afghanistan and all the northern places before there where they just rode through. You
Yeah.
know, they would ride through with their sheep, their cows, and
Mm-hmm.
all these things, and that's how they would survive off the meat, off
Mm-hmm.
of all these things. And so like knowing now how to actually like
Grow food.
to
Yeah.
like grow
To be able to
food, plant
trade it.
seeds, do irrigation system, it revolutionized their way of living.
Yep. So they established trade networks, even in their reduced post-urban form. Harappan communities maintained long-distance connections across the subcontinent. Craft traditions of extraordinary refinement, which we talked about earlier, bead making, bronze smithing, textile production, the making of pottery that would influence Indian material culture for millennia, and most oh my gosh, I can't say the word.
Intriguingly.
Oh my gosh, my brain just like, I just had a brain fart there. I'm sorry. The most intriguingly religious and spiritual traditions. Mother goddess worship, a prototype of the meditating figure that would eventually become the god Shiva. Ritual bathing practices, reverence for the bull and other animals, many of which would be absorbed into and transformed by the emerging Vedic religious world. Some scholars have argued that the incoming Indo-Aryan came not as an invading army, but quite literally as travelers with trade ships, priests, merchants, and specialized craftspeople, fleeing disruptions further west, arriving in Indian ports with the consent and perhaps the welcome of the communities already there. The Harappan cities had been managing complex, multi ethnic populations for centuries. Their administrative systems were sophisticated enough to settle and direct incoming populations. The idea that a group of steppe pastoralists simply walked in and took over an organized, well administered civilization seems, on reflection, rather less plausible than the alternative. That they negotiated, settled, traded, and gradually became part of a larger world.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things to see where it's like it's integration has something that like I think society strived away from for a while. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, war has always been occurring, especially in like highly packed areas like with Europe where you have like all these city states and countries that are all close together. And
Mm-hmm.
like in Mesopotamia, you have the wars with the Hittites.
Yeah.
You have Egypt and all these things, and they're constantly fighting over control over certain areas. But this group of people who lived kind of on the outskirts of that and could still manage the trip via boats and everything
Mm-hmm.
like that was able to maintain a well integrated society that welcomed people who are willing to really, do well for the civilization. And so, at a time of hardship,
Yeah.
they were able to like, benefit from
Each other.
each other.
And they were like, it was really bad. When the Harappan civilization or IBC, when their downfall was absolutely devastating. Which makes me think like, these people, like these pastoralists came in, they're like, oh, we got this wheel.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
like, oh, we got
We got
jewelry,
toilets.
clothes, and we have
Yeah,
toilets.
yeah. Like,
And they're like,
toilets?
cool.
What? You
What
mean
is
like
that?
the bush?
What is a toilet?
Yeah, for real.
And that's a trash bin over there. Like, oh, what?
Yeah, so they're just like throwing their shit on the ground. Like, no. But yeah, so we hope you enjoyed part 1.
Yes.
We're gonna be working on part 2, hopefully getting that done in the upcoming week.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna be going new ideas. We want to cover sati, which is the ritual burning of women. It's crazy.
They're widowed wives.
Yeah,
basically.
So it's like if your husband died, they at some point started burning the women as well. It makes me think of in Egypt how
It's
they
like it was implemented in 300 BCE, so it's like way later than all this.
So yeah,
Which we would love to talk.
It's
about as
fascinating
well.
because in the Vedas they talk about how you should walk away from the
Yeah,
fire
like,
and not
like basically what they were saying was like, don't be sad about it. You have a life. Move on. I think that's what the Rig Veda talked about. There's a beautiful poem which we will talk about and mention in our, when we're covering sati, the sati system. That's what it was called.
But that would be a whole different series.
Yeah, for sure.
We're gonna go into all kinds of subjects. We'd love to hear feedback, and if there's any ideas that you guys want to hear about that or something about within this context, We're gonna try to start doing this regularly. So
Please
um,
shoot it in the comments.
yeah, give us a like, subscribe, let your
Yeah.
homies know if they think that'd be interesting. Hopefully you learn some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so much into this. We'll begin continuing off next time, starting with the archaeology of blending and how all these things two worlds were touched.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Take your time, or others will, and stay curious and question all history, because all of these things have been covered with all kinds of context by people who want you to not know about this stuff for some reason. So
We will be adding like links of places where we found all the information. So please feel free to like check them out.
and
Yeah, let us know your thoughts.
signing off.